Good day, eh? Welcome again to another Mr. Kilroy presentation on behalf of the Freedom Pages. Today I would like to go into a topic of a pair of essays by uh, Peter Landry. I've taken directly from his website. Peter Landry is a Nova Scotia lawyer and professor at Dalhousie University. He's also a prodigious writer. I will link his website below, which is a goldmine of information to those that are interested in uh, subjects concerning law, society, and mankind. Okay, common law. I now deal with a species of law known as common law. Common law is law that comes from the common people versus legislation, which comes from the experts. Common law comes about at the root levels of society. It is not law that is imposed by some authority from on high. The development of common law was essentially a private affair concerning millions of people throughout dozens of generations and stretching across several centuries. It is a process that is self-adjusting and which goes on every day unnoticed, without great expense to the state and without fractionalizing society. This is to be compared with a legislative process, a comparison I make elsewhere. Again, visit his website. The common law is a great scientific lab, the resources and results of which are brought to bear on the populations which are fortunate enough to possess an English common law tradition. Now, these would be Canada, the United States, and Australia, and we can't forget New Zealand. Now, my use of the adjective scientific will be better appreciated after one reads my essay, Siren's Song. Sufficient to say, here at this place, that nature is great and the ultimate scientific testing lab. And it always, in time, shakes out the truth. Whether we appreciate it or not, for hundreds of years, the common law tests, observes, adjusts, and reobserves on a continual basis. The fact of the matter is that there exists all around us a great body of law which has not ever been, or nor could it be, written down in one spot. In a way, it's more of a process which has a single guiding rule, the golden rule. It could be also defined as the negative golden rule. Now here we go. Don't do something to someone that you don't want to have visited on yourself, either directly or through the agency of a government. Though it has suffered much at the hands of legislators, common law is yet followed in all major English-speaking nations around the world. Common law to England was and is its very force. The greatness of England, certainly in the past, attributable, I would say fully attributable, to the stabilizing and enriching institution that we have come to know as common law. The subject of the common law is a great and wonderful subject. Its evolutionary development and its great benefits make it the most superior law system known in the world. as history will readily tell. Common law is a result of natural sequences, which harden first into custom and then into law. It did not come about as an act of will, as an act of a group aware only of the instant moment, unaware of the nature and history of man. It came about as a result of a seamless and continual development through process we can hardly begin to understand. It evolved along with man. If we were to take the common law, figuratively speaking, as a huge tent and net, so to cover and to hold safe all those engaged in the human circus, we may liken the guise or supporting lines to tradition and culture. Now let's contrast that with legislation. What is legislation? Part 1. Legislation, Robert's rules. Though I hate to give it a place in the scheme of things, legislation, I suppose, falls as one of two heads of law. The first is the common law, the sweetheart at the head of the table, who gets things done by consent and agreement. And then at the other end, smelly, brutish, with sword and rope, sits legislation, and claims its right to a position at the table because it fits the definition of the larger concept of law, a rule of conduct imposed by authority. The body of rules, whether proceeding from formal enactment or from custom, which a particular state or community recognizes as binding on its members or subjects. However, legislation is always subject to losing its authority as law by slipping out from under the definition, and this on account of its despicable character. Legislation will lose its force as being law when a significant part of the community does not and will not recognize it. As being binding upon itself. Legislation is always law that is top-down driven. When they draft a legislation in Parliament, it isn't the actual MP that does it. It's his bureaucrats, his civil servants, the experts on the subject. And if they lack the expertise, they'll go to the people that the legislation will affect, i.e. the Banking Act was largely written by the banks. Very befitting of the term Robert's rules. Legislation is usually an act of Parliament that has been lobbied for. An interest group has wished to impose a rule on society. That happens all the time. Look at the Family Law Act in Ontario. It's been revised and has made some rather ridiculous impositions on families. I not having the act in front of me, nor a specific instance coming to mind. I could also point out that the term ad hoc fits with legislation. Ad hoc means in the moment. So today something is a problem. So we pass a law or pass a statute to cover it. Well, what if that situation changes? Well, that statute still remains on the books and is enforceable. Now, the prime example I would make of ad hoc legislation would be the Highway Traffic Act of Ontario's amendment known as street racing or stunt driving on the streets. It was a legislation that was lobbied for by mothers of victims of car accidents due to street racing. And once again, the government, just in the ever wanting to be popular, passed the legislation. They arbitrarily said anyone doing 150 kilometers per hour was street racing. Now, this is a strict liability offense. The only excuse you could have for doing that would be an emergency, because there's, again, the common law maxim of necessity makes the law. I've driven that fast when my wife was pregnant and was having difficulties. I got a phone call that she was going to the hospital because she was bleeding. Well, I was doing well over that 150 an hour threshold to get to her side. Well, presumably, if I had been caught with that, I would have been charged, so on and so forth. I could have been able to fight that and use the excuse of necessity. I don't really know if anybody has ever fought a ticket, but in Canada it is done by a justice of the peace, or as it was known in the old days, a magistrate. And he basically just sides with the police anyways. I've only ever won, actually, in fact, yeah, I've only ever won once in that court. And it was pertaining to an accident, and it was a hazard that was not properly marked, and I could prove it so. But anyhow, that is the thing. Yes, there's, like I say, there is some utility to legislation. Legislation helps some things be automatic. Otherwise, we would be spending an inordinate amount of time involved in some legal process or another. Legislation does allow things to happen automatically. Why? Because they've now set up a department in the government to make it work that way. You can go to them, fill out some paperwork, and the wheels keep moving. Like I said, there is some utility to it. But I'd like to get to this golden rule. It's a negative golden rule. You see, basically, the only way you can offend the common law, you can only do it in three ways. You cause an injury to another person or another human being. B, destroy his property. And I believe you could put theft under that as well, because destroying his property would deprive him of the use of that property, and effectively and essentially that's what theft does. And C, commit an act of fraud, which is knowingly misleading people, telling a big whopper. Well, our legislators mislead us all the time, and I don't see anyone locking them up. Prime example is Alan Rock literally committed an act of fraud in order to enact the Firearms Act in Canada. Problem is that when you're dealing with senior levels of policing, they're not as up to date and astute on the laws as the rank and file. Now that was pointed out to me by a retired RCMP officer. But again, it's long after the fact. Oh well, the phone rings, I have to take it. For the Freedom Pages, have a good day.